O Father, can we be redeemed? O Mother, what is life and death? What price must we pay for you to send your child unto us? For the chained and the scarred, for the broken and the damned, let us never forget the redemption price.
Welcome to The Black Butterfly, Book 1 of the Sacred Blood series by Sarah Yuher. 2. Colored Cards of the Future. As the last snows of winter finally melted and spring went into full bloom, Erlia's days continued as usual. She would wake with the sunset and bathe in the women's bath before heading to the kitchens. There, she would get a meal of leftovers from the Dampers' dinner. The kitchen master would set aside her lunch for the middle of her shift, and she would take a break to eat it when she could. Every morning before returning to her room, Erlias would admire the forest the mountains overlooked. The trees that had lost their leaves in winter grew greener every day. Some trees looked white to her from this distance, and she wondered what the blossoms on them looked like. Some mornings, she even saw a massive bird flying over the forest, glittering like a silver streak in the morning light of dawn. On one of the mornings, she could see that bird. She overlooked the damper who came up beside her to the well. She squeaked and hurriedly dropped into a curtsy when he began to fill the bucket with water. Her brief glimpse of him before she had averted her eyes to the ground named who he was. Amber eyes and black hair like ebony dipped in blood named him as General Maverick's grandson, Kieran Briardal Bloodoath. Some called him the Ghost, but Erlias didn't know why. "You can rise from the curtsy." His voice sounded tired. As Erlias stood straight, she kept her eyes downcast. She noticed that his clothes were bloodied and ripped as if he had been fighting with some beast in the night. A few nights ago, werewolves had tried attacking the barracks. They had targeted the outside granary near the kitchens. "Thank you for protecting us from the beasts, Master Kieran," she said quietly. He mumbled something under his breath. She thought she caught the words half-starved wolves before he spoke louder so she could hear. "I wonder what kind of bird that is." She perked up and followed his gaze to where the silver bird was still flying over the forest. She wondered if it was hunting or just enjoying the moment. Before Erlias could respond to Kieran, the damper had turned away and walked toward the sleeping quarters of the damper soldiers that had permanent residence at the barracks. She watched him go quietly before she looked back towards the forest as the bird dove back under the canopy. Matron Bethany eventually replaced Leah with a 16-year-old girl named Emily. Emily was a pretty girl with reddish-brown hair that looked like copper and fell down her back in waves. She had spring green eyes and freckles across her cheeks and the bridge of her button nose. The girl was quick to learn, and Erlias found her habit of humming bird song rather soothing as they worked together. Erlias even found herself humming along with Emily, which would cause the girls to burst out in giggles every time she missed a note. She found she liked this new girl much better than Leah. Leah had constantly talked about how attractive all the Dampiers were. She always bragged about when one would take her to his bed and feed on her. It had irritated Erlias, and she had enjoyed the peace since she left. At the end of the shift, Erlias and Emily would walk together to the well to fill their water buckets before they headed back to the slaves' rooms. As they walked by the gardens, his fellow gardeners would tease Elric and Emily would tease Erlias. Both would end up blushing as the others laughed. A week after spring had finally given way to summer, Erlias woke to see an envelope on her floor at the foot of the door. She froze in her bed as she looked at the envelope. What was inside the envelope would tell her if she was going to be presented to the vampires like a choice cut of steak, or if she was to be mated off with another slave or damper. She got off of her cot and walked over to the envelope. Erlias picked it up with shaking hands before she set it on her dresser unopened. Then she gathered her towel, bar of soap, and change of clothes before heading to the bath. She was scared to open it, scared that it contained the red card that would let her know that she was to be presented to the vampires as an offering. That's how it always was. Since the majority of the slaves couldn't read or write, when they turned 18, they were given an envelope with a colored card inside. White meant they were to be married off with a suitable human slave. Blue if they were to be given to a damper as a spouse. Red if they were to be presented to Lord Frostfang and his fledglings. If a vampire liked them, they would take them as a personal handmaiden or manservant to do with as they pleased. If none of the vampires wanted them, they were married off to a damper. Every year on the winter solstice, every slave given a card would go to the head damper of the barracks. Those with white or blue cards will be sent to their new spouse, or their spouse will be presented to them. If they were needed somewhere else in Frostfang's hold, they were sent there. Last winter, all 4 of the female slaves who turned 18 were given red cards, and all 4 came back to be mated with Dampiers. Only 1 male slave turned 18 last year, Elric, but since his birthday was after the solstice, he was given his white card for this coming winter. 3 other men, and only 1 other woman were turning 18 this year. Rumor among the slaves was that Lord Frostfang himself still had no personal handmaiden, and had rejected every slave presented to him for years. Aerlias prayed she had been given a white card. While Dampiers didn't need to feed the same way as vampires, they still craved the blood of humans. Other slaves had talked of it around her. Blood fuels their baser instincts, the instincts to kill or mate. Aerlias had even witnessed this herself. One night, when she was on night cleaning duty 3 years ago, she had been in the damper dorms dropping off clean clothes to the different dorm rooms and gathering the dirty clothes bags when she heard a strange noise from around a corner. As Aerlias peeked around the corner, she was frozen on the spot with fear. Unable to look away, she watched as a damper had one of the other maids against the wall. Her skirt was hiked up to her waist, her legs wrapped around his waist as his hands cupped her rear. He was thrusting his hips into hers, and they were grunting with the motions. Her face was turned away from Aerlias as she bared her neck to him. Once he'd noticed Aerlias, the damper grinned as he licked the girl's neck, flashing his fangs for her to see in the lamplight of the hall. Then he sank his fangs into the soft flesh, giving a final thrust as he began to feed. His eyes never left Aerlias's as they began to glow with the red luster of fresh blood. With a squeak, Aerlias grabbed her laundry cart and fled back to the laundry room. A month after the encounter, the maid's belly had begun to grow, and she was carted off somewhere, and Aerlias had been moved to the baker's kitchen. Aerlias had accepted Matron Bethany's explanation that she had talent with baking without question, knowing that being in the kitchens at night meant fewer chances of encountering Dampiers. The Dampiers slept at night and trained during the day. She shook herself from the memory. Aerlias finished her bath and headed back to her room to prepare for her baking shift quickly. She avoided looking at the envelope the entire time in her room. When she met Emily in the hall, the other girl looked at her curiously. "Have you received your card yet?" she asked. Startled out of her thoughts, Aerlias nodded. "Yes, it was delivered while I was sleeping." "What color did you get?" Emily asked as she peered at the older girl. "I don't know. I haven't opened it yet." Some girls didn't open the envelope until the morning of the solstice, when it was time for them to go to the head damper. Most wanted the red card. Being a handmaiden meant a more leisurely life and more food. Vampires liked their handmaidens and manservants to be well-fed and healthy. If they bore the vampire healthy damper children, they were given more freedoms and luxuries. It was the same with human slave pairs that birthed children with the ability to embrace the Sai or the Orin. "Which color are you praying for?" Emily inquired. Aerlias shook her head, refusing to answer. With a dramatic sigh, Emily accepted Aerlias's reluctance to answer, and the pair continued to the kitchen in silence to start their baking. The night went by like most, except when Emily would hum her birdsong, Aerlias did not join her, preferring to remain quiet in her thoughts. At the end of the shift, they walked back to their rooms quietly. So lost in her thoughts, even Elric and the other gardeners could tell she had received her card. They did not ask about it, allowing her a small measure of aloneness. And so, it was for the next week. Aerlias remained in her quiet mood, not emerging from it until after the other girl, who was turning 18, had received her card. The girl was a kitchen slave named Samantha. The morning she received her card, she showed it off in relief. She had received a white card indicating that she would be mated off to a human. 2 years ago, she had accidentally spilled a bucket of mop water on a damper's feet, angering him. He had then attacked her and fed on her, leaving her for dead in the hallway. She had recovered and been moved to the kitchens, but she had been petrified of the Dampiers and vampires ever since. Airlias joined the others in congratulating her on receiving the white card. Everyone knew the story. No one had asked Airlias what card she had received, and she still hadn't opened the envelope. It was still on her dresser next to her wash basin, a daily reminder that it held her future within it. As summer grew hotter and then gave way to autumn's changing colors, Airlias still had not opened the envelope. When the gardens had grown heavy with the harvests of fall and were all harvested, the envelope remained on her dresser unopened. When the first snow came, the kitchen master brought another new baker for Airlias and Emily to train in preparation for the winter solstice. A week before the solstice, Matron Bethany relieved all who had received the cards of their duties and ordered them to their rooms. They were only allowed out to relieve themselves and to bathe. Their meals were brought to them, and damper guards were posted at their doors to prevent them from running away. On the morning of the solstice, they were gathered in front of the main building. General Maverick Briardell Bloodoath was waiting for them. He was a grizzled bear of a man with gray hair that had once been the crimson-highlighted black of Kieran's, indicating he had been alive a long time. He wore a clean-cut uniform of black and white and a set of twin swords at his hip. He stood straight and tall, watching the human slaves like a predator watches its prey as they lined up before him. He held a paper in one of his hands, but clearly knew what was written on it by heart. Behind him were 3 carriages waiting for the slaves they were to carry to their new homes. Airlias didn't recognize the drivers of 2 of them, but she did recognize Kieran sitting in the driver's seat of the 3rd. That carriage was smaller than the others, and the black stallion at its head stamped its hoof and snorted impatiently. Airlias remembered the first time she had seen General Maverick. It had been the year before that she was summoned to his office to be examined in preparation for deciding what color card she would be receiving for her 18th birthday. Upon entering General Maverick's office, Airlias got down on her knees and bowed deeply before his desk. The room had a plain but well-made, polished wooden desk, chairs, and shelves. He was a damper of power and well thought of by Lord Frostfang. "Stand so I can get a good look at you, girl." That was all he said to Airlias. Standing up, Airlias kept her eyes on the floor as the general began to walk around her, examining her body thoroughly as a horse breeder would examine a horse for sale. She didn't resist as he took her hand, pricked her finger with his dagger, and licked the bead of blood that appeared. "When I call your name, step forward and present your card to me." His voice was deep but carried like a thunderclap in the courtyard, bringing Airlias back to the present from the past. Starting with the males, he called each of their names, and they presented their white cards to him one by one. He then indicated which carriage they were to enter. Elric and the other gardener slave, Will, both went into the middle carriage while the other 2 went into the left one. "Samantha," he called out, and the girl walked forward and handed him her white card. Her hand trembled. "The middle carriage," he said after reading the words on the card that meant nothing to those who could not read. Samantha scurried to the carriage and got in. Airlias watched all this, the still unopened envelope in her sweating hand. Every moment she stood there in the cold, snowy morning, the more scarred she got, the more fervently she prayed for a white card. "Airlias," he finally called. With stiff legs, she walked forward to the old damper and handed him the envelope. He raised his eyebrow at the unbroken seal as he took it. Popping open the wax seal, he pulled out the red card inside and read it. "The carriage on the right." With that, he returned to the main building, leaving the humans to their new fates. Ice-cold fear gripped Airlias's heart as she walked to the carriage. She was told to enter the same one that Kieran the Ghost was driving. Once she was inside and the door was shut, she began to weep quietly while she prayed, hoping with all her heart and soul that she would be rejected.
Enter the world, but tread with care. Those roots remember every prayer. Carved from ash, from bone, from flame. The sacred beasts don't play your game. Here change comes swift on silver wing, with dragonflies that bite and sting. Truth flickers soft and sharp as steel, and every wound must learn to heal. Don't come armed with hollow lore, this world won't let you fake the war. For those who think they understand, you'll bleed the fastest by your hand. So read and ache, be torn apart, these stories rise from broken hearts. With grit and teeth they scream and soar, you've never known a world like this before.